Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Representatives from the California Highway Patrol say that they are searching for multiple suspects this week following an extremely dangerous and brazen daylight robbery that was partially caught on camera by terrified witnesses. According to reports, the incident took place at around 1:30 p.m. on October 24th on a stretch of Interstate 10 in Los Angeles. It began when a Dodge minivan was spotted pursuing a black Alfa Romeo going eastbound just west of Arlington Avenue. The vehicles were traveling at a high rate of speed before the Dodge appeared to deliberately crash into the back of the Alfa Romeo, sending it slamming into the side of the freeway in what has been described as a Hollywood-like stunt. Following the collision, multiple witnesses recorded footage of the chaotic scene as four men in ski masks and black hoodies got out of the minivan and ran towards the Alfa Romeo. Armed with hammers and crowbars, they proceeded to rifle through the vehicle while its owner was threatened and held at the side of the road on his knees with his hands in the air. Less than a minute later, the masked and hooded men got into a white Chevy Malibu that pulled up alongside the wreckage, which took off, leaving the minivan behind. At the time of this recording, police say that they are still investigating the situation and have not made any arrests in connection with the incident. The victim's name has not been released, and so far authorities have declined to say whether any valuables were taken during the apparent robbery. Anyone with information about the crime is encouraged to reach out to the California Highway Patrol Southern Major Crimes Unit at 323-644-9550. Well, another Halloween is upon us, folks, and as usual, that can mean only one thing: people doing weird things involving clowns. Representatives from the Washington State Patrol say that a Seattle area man learned a poetic lesson about acting like a dummy last week when he was found driving with a dummy in his front passenger seat, in what police say was an attempt to bypass highway carpool lane rules. According to reports, the incident took place on October 20th when State Patrol Trooper Rick Johnson spotted the unidentified driver traveling in an HOV lane on Interstate 405 in the city of Renton. When he saw something strange in the front passenger seat, Johnson pulled the driver over. It turned out to be a large, creepy clown dummy that was clearly meant to be a Halloween decoration. While the clown may have looked like it was possessed by 1,000 vengeful spirits, unfortunately, none of them could be counted as passengers, at least as far as the state's motor vehicle code was concerned anyway. As a result, the driver was fined for the violation. Taking to social media after the incident, Johnson wrote that he appreciated the driver's Halloween vibe, though he probably would have been better off just trying to cheat the HOV rules the old-fashioned way. Apparently, the driver will face an extra $200 in fines for his use of the dummy, on top of his $186 ticket. Authorities in Escambia County, Florida say that a local couple are facing several serious charges this week after they allegedly lured a man to meet up under the pretext of a date and then viciously attacked and robbed him. According to reports, the incident began in early October when the victim, who has not been identified by name, met one of the suspects, 25-year-old Natalie Fonseca, through Facebook. The pair exchanged messages, ultimately deciding to hang out on October 6th. Though the first night went normally enough, things apparently took a dark turn when Fonseca invited the man back out the following evening. After arriving back at the address where he had dropped her off the night before, the victim was introduced to 31-year-old Nafis Reynolds, who Fonseca claimed was her uncle. Police now believe Reynolds is actually Fonseca's boyfriend, and that this was all part of the plan. The group of three drove around together for a while that night, until at some point the couple told the victim that they were going to kill him. The man later told police that he thought Fonseca and Reynolds were joking until they started attacking him. After beating him and inflicting deep cuts to his neck with a knife, the couple allegedly drove him to a bridge where they stole his phone, shoes, money, and car before throwing him off into the river below. The victim reportedly survived the fall and was able to swim back to shore, where he flagged down a passing police officer. His vehicle was later found set on fire not far from where the alleged attack took place. Following an investigation, Fonseca and Reynolds were arrested and charged with attempted murder, armed carjacking, armed robbery, and kidnapping. At the time of this recording, they remain in custody. Authorities in Spokane, Washington say that 2 people are facing charges this week and a third is under investigation following a strange heist at a local car dealership that even the victims described as like something out of a movie. The whole thing started on the morning of October 24th when employees at Northtown Auto Sales arrived to quite the chaotic scene. Their offices had been broken into and 8 vehicles had been stolen from the business's sales lot. The point of entry was pretty obvious. There was a giant hole in the office ceiling where a long rope was hanging down. When employees checked the business's security footage, things got even stranger. The video showed 2 male suspects, one of whom was dressed in a mask and a knee-length fur coat, the other of whom appeared to be wearing a straw cowboy hat. The men had rappelled into the office through a vent on the roof, taking a bunch of the dealership's keys once inside. After climbing back out, they had briefly left before returning with friends and driving off with the 8 vehicles. During an investigation, police learned that this probably wasn't the first time the thieves had broken into the dealership. About 4 months prior, someone else had come in through the roof, but the alarm had been triggered when they opened one of the office's doors. The culprit ended up smashing a window to escape. Employees at the dealership told authorities they believed that this had been a sort of dry run for this week's crime. This time, though, they knew how not to set off the alarm system. Unfortunately for the suspects, it seems that the glory of their heist was short-lived. 2 of the alleged perpetrators, 19-year-old Fran Anunar and 20-year-old Heron Linfield, have now been arrested and are facing vehicle theft and burglary charges. Charges are also pending against a third unidentified suspect. Additionally, police say 7 of the 8 stolen cars were recovered and returned to the dealership. Representatives from the West Virginia State Fire Marshal's office say that a 32-year-old man is officially facing charges after he allegedly burned his own house down earlier this month because he didn't want to clean up a mess left by his new dog. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime on October 6th when dispatchers in Randolph County received a 911 call from the suspect, 32-year-old Randy Nethkin. Nethkin stated that his house in the community of Mabie was on fire and that the blaze had originated in the attic. Upon extinguishing the flames, though, almost immediately things didn't add up. Despite what Nethkin had told emergency responders, the fire had not originated in the attic. In fact, it was clear that multiple fires had been started all over the residence, each of which were separate and were from different heat sources. In other words, this was arson. When Nethkin was confronted with this information at the end of the investigation roughly 2 weeks later, he apparently admitted to what had really happened. He allegedly told authorities that he burned his own house down because his new puppy had pooped all over the place, and he didn't feel like cleaning it up. As if this wasn't wild enough, police say that after the fire, Nethkin went online and created a GoFundMe campaign to try and raise money to rebuild his house. On the now defunct page, the 32-year-old wrote that he needed cash to help pay for the damage because he, quote, didn't really have a lot of money. Nethkin was arrested on October 18th and has now been charged with first-degree arson. It looks like he's going to have even less money now because according to the last available update, he was being held in the county jail on $20,000 bond. A 30-year-old Connecticut man probably isn't going to be winning a Father of the Year award anytime soon, after he reported his son missing on an allegedly drunken trip to a local supermarket, only for it to later be determined that the child had been left at home. According to reports, the incident began just before 8:20 p.m. on October 23rd, when state police received a call about a missing child at a Price Chopper grocery store in the town of Mansfield. The child's father, 30-year-old Colby Parker, said that he had left his young son inside his vehicle while shopping inside the store, but had returned to find that he was gone. Troopers were quickly dispatched to the scene and began a search, one that was backed up by 2 other local police departments and canine units. A reverse 911 call was also sent out to residents, notifying them to be on the lookout for the missing boy. Things took a turn, however, when Price Chopper employees began reviewing the store's surveillance footage and noticed something interesting. You see, Parker had actually made 2 trips to the supermarket that evening. The footage revealed that when he arrived the second time, he was alone. Sure enough, when police followed up at Parker's residence, the boy was there and unharmed. Given what happened next, it seems that it may have actually been a good thing that the child was left behind. Noticing that Parker was showing signs of, quote, possible impairment, officers had him take multiple field sobriety tests, all of which he apparently failed. The 30-year-old was arrested and is now facing charges of operating under the influence of alcohol or drugs, second-degree reckless endangerment, risk of injury to a child, and second-degree breach of peace. His son, meanwhile, was placed in the care of a family member. Authorities in Worcester County, Massachusetts say that they are still searching for a 33-year-old man this week, several days after he allegedly shot and killed his wife before abandoning their 4 young children. The disturbing incident began at around 9:15 a.m. on October 22nd, when police in the city of Gardner were called to the Cherry Street home of 33-year-old Aaron and 30-year-old Brianne Pennington. They were alerted by a neighbor who had called 911 after the couple's 4 young children ran over for help, saying that they heard their mom crying in her bedroom and they couldn't find their dad anywhere. When officers arrived at the scene, they made an awful discovery. Brianne was lying on her bed unresponsive, suffering from obvious gunshot wounds to the face. It was quickly determined that she was dead. Though no weapons were found at the home, 3 shell casings were recovered from the bedroom. Shortly after, police began searching for Aaron Pennington, whose white BMW Model 320 was found to be missing from the residence. That vehicle was recovered the following evening in a wooded area at Camp Collier, a Boy Scout camp not far from the crime scene. A murder warrant has since been issued for Pennington, who it's believed is still on the run. So far, searches of the area around where the 33-year-old's car was found and a nearby lake have turned up no additional signs of him. As far as a motive in the case goes, authorities say that there had been problems in the Penningtons' marriage for quite some time. It's said that prior to her death, Brianne had been trying to take their children and relocate to Texas. Further disturbing insight into the crime was reportedly found on Aaron Pennington's phone. In a note from the evening before the shooting, he reportedly wrote, quote, "Don't say anything. Be quiet. If she wakes up, just say you're getting nasal spray. Get on the side of the bed, very close proximity to the head. Put a hole in her head." It's been further reported that Pennington had a documented history of mental health issues and had threatened to take his own life in the past. At the time of this recording, the search for the 33-year-old continues. In the meantime, the couple's children have been placed in the care of the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. Representatives from the Maine State Police say that 18 people are dead this week and more than a dozen others are injured after a man carried out disturbing shooting attacks at 2 popular businesses in one of the state's largest cities. The horrifying incident began just a few minutes before 7 on the evening of October 25th at Just-in-Time Recreation in the city of Lewiston. The bowling alley was in the middle of hosting a youth league night when out of nowhere, the gunman, later identified as 40-year-old Robert Card, walked in through the front doors and began to fire indiscriminately with a rifle. Before police could even respond to the scene, more 911 calls began flooding in from a second location. It turned out that Card had continued the attack at a restaurant called Schmenge's Bar and Grill about 4 miles away. Shots were fired there at approximately 7:08 p.m. Once again, by the time police arrived, Card had fled. Roughly 3 hours later, authorities found the 40-year-old's white Subaru at a boat launch in the town of Lisbon. The location was about 15 miles from the first crime scene. The vehicle was abandoned, and there was no sign of Card anywhere. A manhunt involving multiple law enforcement agencies was quickly launched for the shooter, during which time the city of Lewiston and the surrounding area remained on high alert. Residents were advised to stay indoors, businesses were closed, and schools and local colleges canceled classes. The search finally came to an end a little over 48 hours later, when Card's body was found on a property belonging to a recycling center less than a mile from where his vehicle had been abandoned. He reportedly died after turning his weapon on himself. Some reports state that the recycling center had actually been searched twice previously during the manhunt, though Card was not found earlier because the place where he was discovered was not actually part of the main facility. The actual location was at an overflow area separated by a street where materials are kept in metal containers. Card was reportedly in one of those containers. At the time of this recording, the awful tragedy has claimed the lives of 18 victims, all of whom have now been identified and whose names are now on screen. Among them are father and son William and Aaron Young, who were at the bowling alley that night to take part in the youth league, as well as volunteer bowling coach Bob Violette, who reportedly died trying to save his students from the gunfire. At least 13 other people were injured in the attack, 3 of whom are still said to be in critical condition. As for the motive behind the shooting, multiple sources state that Card had been experiencing documented mental health issues in the weeks and months prior. There are also unconfirmed reports that the 40-year-old recently ended a relationship with a longtime girlfriend, and that the specific businesses targeted in the attack may have been selected because they had spent time there as a couple. Particular attention is now being paid to alleged warnings that authorities received about Card in the lead-up to the crime. It said that the 40-year-old Army reservist had been committed to a mental health facility for 2 weeks over the summer after 2 concerning incidents, one in which he allegedly threatened to shoot up a National Guard base in southern Maine. Information about this was passed on to police, and there was reportedly an attempt to conduct a welfare check at Card's residence. However, when authorities were unable to reach Card, this attempt was apparently given up, and the case was closed. There are additional questions about how the 40-year-old was able to legally purchase his firearms, considering his ongoing mental health problems, with the FBI claiming that this information had not made its way into the background check system. These and similar unanswered questions are currently being investigated by police. The situation is still developing. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.